new features. So this now is reflected a certain way. You probably won't notice a difference, but the other thing is ambient noise in the background, which should sway in and out as I'm talking. So these things should hopefully work together. I hope the volume is not too loud. I'll have to test that, play around with it. It should fade out when I'm speaking, so you can see all of the words that I'm saying are creating a little bundle. The tail is down here, right where that dot is at the bottom, and it swirls and keeps going right up until, point. But yeah, so it's an interesting question that came out earlier about an aspect of meditation. And I think for perhaps the purposes of my mission here today, maybe to try and explore what that is. So in order to achieve this, to get in a what I would say correct frame of mind, I've got a couple little notes going on, so I'm going to be switching back and forth here. The first thing I want to do is read a poem from the character Sora. This was published on June 28th, 2023. And if you can hear any background noise, it's because I'm very close to the road, and people like to have those exhaust pipes that are very loud for whatever reason. In any case, I'm actually quite curious. I haven't tested how a poem looks in the shape here yet, so apparently it's on this side now. It wants to do its own thing. I programmed it that way, but given the volume of words that are coming out, it's keeping up quite nicely. And I guess before I get into that, just to explore with you a little bit here, I'm going to turn the settings on. I like this one. It says escaping, but if I turn the blur off for a second, you can see it's obviously faster and it's more sharp. There's a lot of words. There's 120-ish words right now going on, all jumbled up together. If I stop talking, though, that number should go down kind of quickly, but I can blur this out quite significantly. Changes it quite a bit, but I settle on around 10% over here. In fact, I'll leave it at 13. That seems right. I like that. So, just a little bit of insight. Now, obviously, my frame ticker up here, this is for the puppet. It's not necessarily for the orbs in the background. The intent is the same, of course. They are meant to do the same things. So, I digress. I like to show off. Poetry. This was one of Sora's poems. Now, if you recall, Sora is the immortal character that came into existence about 13,000 years ago in the timeline. I see relevance to sharing this one, and then the other portion, which I will share after from a story that I had started writing. But they seem relevant, so this story, or this poem, is titled Pelted Synapse. Single solitary explosions fire off in rapid succession. Each fabric of tangible existence sustains a hit. Absolute silence overwhelms cognition between them, yet a violently red rose persists unperturbed by this. My past acts flood lakes with grief. I'm made ill by poisonous thoughts, the best person by logos, sure, except one who's made still from dangerous forgot. Simplex pathos-derived meaningful polygons shape the very spirit of this sample experience. A mere box or container holds time within it. This toy home called Earth is my favorite. Off in some distance, merely inches away, holographic existence feigns opaque memory, blinded by a veil of secrets, universal ethos. My memory decays and resists remembering details. When will this rain go away? Snap, 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 snap. One of these days I will be surrounded by an audience of people snapping. I'll get like those ASMR tinglies in the head. Hopefully the ambient music might be doing that for you. Yeah, so I saw relevance in that. For me, pelted synapse is the brain trying to communicate, very similar to this. It's just going crazy. And pretty much anything interrupts it. So this lake of time, maybe, or I don't even know, whatever's in it, it's the home, right? This is the place where things stay. Now, in the poem, I'll reread the line. My past acts flood lakes with grief. Sure, right? Like hyper poetic, it means something you can make an essay out of it and probably write a thesis, right? Amazing, right? Um, Nothing special. It's just a rhyme scheme in my head that fit other stuff. But obviously, sometimes poetry speaks from heart. And when grief is the result of a past act, it suggests that there's regret, right? There's something to it. In this instance, it's liquid, it's fluid, it's moving. Um, I completely forgot to watch this while I read the poem, so I can't wait to look forward to that on the watch back. But yet a violently red rose persists unperturbed by this. My past acts flood lakes with grief. I'm made ill by poisonous thoughts. It could suggest, in different conditions of nature, that a lake is a reservoir. It's a place where things stay, water in specific, of course, but nature can gather around that and continue. So meaning can be derived out of this, and obviously within a framework, let's say, of seasonal change, you might have a higher water level or a lower one, or when the moon changes, you can have tides ripple in or out or whatever. You can go fishing. Apologies, I had to cut there. There was some background noise occurring that was distracting. But a lake is a reservoir, right? You can go fishing. It's supplemental to life, this essence of water. But when you talk seasonality, right? Spring, summer, even fall, the lake is solid. Spring, obviously, full of life. Fall is full of leaves, and maybe summer is somewhere in the middle, right? Generally speaking, you get 6 months on and 6 months off of supportive water, right? This life-giving essence. But winter is always an interesting one because it's a true winter, and it's not like a equator winter. We're talking about like proper ice, right? Like if you're in a winter situation on a lake, that was cool. Just zoomed by. Oh, there goes another one. I must be talking too fast, and there goes the neighbors again with their pew pew mufflers. Winter is always considered like the dead season, right? Like it's always like the rebirth of the sun and the solstice and all this stuff. Cool, right? But freezing something like an emotion like grief means that it persists. It's encapsulated in this ice prison. Um, and you would expect during spring or something like that, the sign, no fishing or something, or, fishing allowed, or maybe even just the depth as a measurement, 20 feet, 50 feet, 1,000 feet deep. It's always interesting, but then if you apply some historical context and background to it, for myself, my lake, according to this poem, is filled with grief, sadness, as it were. Could be from a number of different sources. If you need some place to put grief, a lake makes sense if you don't have a lot of it, right? Maybe you need an ocean or a whole planet if it's like too much. But in winter, if the grief is frozen, then it would mean that the season of, dead things or rebirth, perhaps, in a way, this cyclical end of a life cycle of nature, that it is stuck where it is. It's not moving. It doesn't go anywhere. So I thought that was an interesting little segue there. I am going to have to splice this video together with the other one to make sure it fits, but from that point, I did want to maybe briefly discuss a little bit of the story that I've been writing. There's this concept of senses, and obviously sensing seasons is one thing, but it's always interesting to sense more than that, to, explore, let's say, that lake, to ice skate on it, when it's winter, or go fishing when it's spring. It's always these stories that we tell ourselves, right? How we unpack what is deeply inside in history. And psychologically, I guess, when these stories are embedded, we use them. They are foundations. They build who we become later. So, if you repeat a good habit, you go to the store, maybe you give $1 to the, homeless person out front, or you buy the Girl Scout cookies, or whatever. You repeat these habits of otherwise good faith, right? So these are genuine, like, humanitarian efforts where you're in a state of giving, you're providing, right? There's an essence of provisioning taking place, that the body, the soul, the mind is cleansed of something through this act of provisioning. But in the sensory experience of this, right, there's a very literal transaction that takes place, something very, very basic. It's only math, right? So just as an example, I'm going to read, this is from chapter 1, a little prefix here. The main character had finished eating dinner and was washing dishes. Among other things, it looked like a petri dish of science breeding experiments. For all the ketchup he used for his meal, it sure seemed like the majority of it was decorative. Save some for everyone else. The various growths on the plate consisted of salt and pepper forests surrounding the ketchup lake. Alfredo sauce must have had a strong army, since it occupied over half the plate, itself being ornate with the grays and blacks of pepper powder. The man was an artist, I'll give him that. I still wonder to this day whether he knew my aversion to gross plates of food and was enjoying the sight of my reaction. It's one paragraph, a couple sentences. The visceral, essence of sensory, not disorder, but overwhelm, I think they call it a sensory disorder, but the perception of sound, sight, touch, smell, tastes, these things can stack up, and as it relates to the pelted synapse, the poem prior, we say things I wrote here, simplex pathos derived meaningful polygons. Not just the orbs moving around, but the shape that the lines are drawing, right? These are paths in the brain as your thoughts are occurring. Mine right now, yours, everyone, right? We could even make an argument that AI is doing this when you ask it a question. A mere box or container holds time within it. This is one path. Had I said any singular word in my past however many minutes different, one word, this whole thing would be different. This whole shape. I can't prove it to you because I'm not going to like verbatim walk my way through this again, but if you can imagine, right, each node, when it swings around, each node is a word. The length of the line is the length of the word, and rotates around. One word. That's all it takes. Spoken word, nonetheless. Apologies for the second interruption there. Life, right? Things happen. So, in any case, yeah. Sounds for me are part of the sensory experience, I think, unlike others, because in my case, and again, unofficially diagnosed, it's all self understood, but through this lens of like ASD, as they say, autism spectrum disorder, I've come to understand some of the quirks, I guess, of my own habits and behaviors. Among them, sounds and auditory shenanigans, anything. Um, any sound, any little sounds, any big sounds. There's a processing that has to take place. Most sounds are registered unless I'm in hyperfocus. So that means that when in idle state, like just now, the distractions that I've been dealing with, or the cars that I was mentioning before, which this is a Jabra headset, so probably didn't come through, but on my side it does. And those things are, by this point, distractions, I guess, but early on in youth, in childhood, uh, it was overstimulating. It was problematic. Loud music, sudden, sharp noises. So, focus for me starts with pure silence, real, pure silence. There's always some videos about that challenge room or whatever with like negative decibels or something. I feel like I would be perfect in there. They say like, oh, you can't last an hour or something. It's like, man, I don't think you know. I would last. I think I would want to live in it. That's the problem. I don't want to go see it because I'd be afraid that I'd never want anything else, and I don't want to spoil or soil my habits that I've formed so far in life anyway. So for me, going back, this lake metaphor of, in my case, grief could be something else if you're thinking of something else on your side, but uh, my lake would probably be labeled something like danger. Really simple. Um, During the summer, the danger sign makes sense for fear of, alligators or whatever, right? Deep water. But in winter, it makes sense because thin ice or uh, just general dangers of snow or whatever. I don't live in the snow, so I don't really know what those dangers are. But after the lake is when Bob Ross starts picturing in my mind happy trees and a little log cabin in the corner with friends. Uh, so there's always something after, right? People don't build homes around lakes because, right? They build it because the lake is the source of life. Water is the source of life. And out there, it's quiet. Wind and trees, maybe a couple animals here and there. That's it. None of these crazy traffic shenanigans. No noisy neighbors, no helicopters, no airplanes, which I'm hearing one right now. Um, so I'm pretty sure the microphone is not picking that up, but I can hear it. It's a jetliner. They fly across this area all the time to make a circle and go land at the airport, which is probably 10 miles that way. But sign of the times, I guess, right? I mentioned before about predicting things a long time ago, watching them come true, right? Manifest or whatever you want to call it. Yes, you could say it's carving a path, right? Dropping seeds and putting these ideas out in the ether. And I have sort of summarized back then that that's what I would be doing. And I'm finding myself arriving at a similar question again to the one that I started back then now. And as of course I'm thinking about it, the precise question that I had earlier escapes me, but um, it comes down to choosing belief, choosing to accept something. Um, Case in point, if you go to a coffee store and you order a cup of coffee, however you take your coffee, in your mind, you've ordered the beverage. It's got, milk, sugar, cream, whatever you put in your coffee. So the barista hands you the cup, and it's wrong. It's a wrong order. What happened? Apparently my little orbs disappeared. Oh, they're coming back. Why aren't they on the screen? I don't know where they ran off to, but anyway, there they go. I don't know what happened there. I must have hit a button or something. Um, they hand you the cup, and just like a distraction that I was in right now, maybe you're distracted and you leave. You don't check the cup, but it's a wrong order. Maybe it's got the wrong kind of sugar, the wrong kind of milk. It's not coffee, it's espresso, or vice versa. Your perception of reality is one thing. You're affixing a specific outcome in that moment, and despite ordering correctly, there's a onslaught of conditions and circumstances that needed to be met that morning, that day, that moment in time for that order to be made incorrectly or correctly. Your precision with which the order takes place is not what guarantees that you get a correct order of coffee. Your barista might have had a bad morning, or maybe a great morning. The barback that's putting ice out up front might have mixed up the sugar boxes or something, or the creamer ran out and nobody said anything, and they mixed it with the other one and nobody said anything. And so, I mean, you can really quickly see chaos, right? How it might manifest into the present moment. All of those little pieces coming together for that one cup of coffee. But then you multiply this out times every person, times every decision, times every continent, times every animal, times every single cell that's a living organism in the world, in the universe, in the galaxy, in the entirety of space-time condensed into one, right? These effects, they're paths, like this path. This is a path. This path exists somewhere. I don't know where. I don't know what it represents. Right now, it's just measuring my words as they come out, which, like the coffee, the spoken word is a physical object presenting to the external environment. I'm trying to make my hand do a present, right? The spoken word is a physical object presenting to the environment. That is not how a hand is supposed to look, but you get what I'm saying. It comes out and it goes away and creates these ripples. And mechanically speaking, they interact with other ripples. And they join and ripple together and wiggle around, and maybe the receiving ripple changes what it does just so slightly. It doesn't have to be a lot. And even though your coffee order said, I want 1 sugar, 1 cream, when it arrives, the recipient might have heard 2 sugars, no cream, or something. You don't know what they heard. You don't know what they saw. The same way that the color red looks different for me than it does for you, for anyone. How would a blind person describe red? Obviously, if they've been blind since birth, the true spectra of white light is not something they're attuned to. So red for them is something completely different than what it is for a color-seeing person, that they can observe the white light spectra. And if you can imagine that words ripple through the same way that light bounces off things and changes the properties it presents on the reflection in a way that is different, sometimes in reverse, in the opposite way, like a negative film image. And this occurs constantly over and over and over again until eventually the message or the statement or the word or the light or the color is just so far away from the original source point that it's indistinguishable from the background noise of the chaos that we witness. Yet every single orb that's spinning around right now in this little thing is a word that I have spoken. And look at the chaos it creates. It's so chaotic it doesn't want to come back. It'll be back. I need to slow down my rate of talking. 3 words per second. That's the amount. And I started doing this because of Quentin Tarantino. Thank you, by the way, for that, Quentin. I used to do this one, but then that movie came out, and now I do this. So thanks for that, by the way. Completely messed me up. But in any case, there's the idea about carving a path. And 25 years ago, more actually, since the essence of the universe was created technically, right? But mine consciously deciding path, the one that I am on right now, was carved. The first sort of shovel to dirt was 25 years ago. The big one, anyway. Before that, I was just kind of like marking the lines with my foot in the sand, you know. But since then, I've been digging and 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 digging digging. And then at some magical moment, I kind of realized, why am I digging with a shovel or my hands or a spoon? I could be using a bulldozer or a trench digger or uh, anything to move more dirt in bigger portions. So I started doing that metaphorically, right? This is not a real hole somewhere, but in the path of life that this thing might be representing. The bigger the tool, the more durable the tool, the sturdier it is, the bigger the plow or the oar or whatever it's called that, scrapes the dirt. Um, you can move more dirt. And in the last, I guess, 5 years, I started digging backwards through dirt that I've already dug. And I found that, even if it's a shovel that I'm using today, the shovel that I was using back then is still like a million times smaller. It's like comparing a spoon to like one of those humongous, ginormic machines that does like, 200 trillion tons of dirt or whatever. You know what I'm talking about, those big massive dirt movers, right? I mean, the size of the shovels in that thing are like 40 feet wide. I mean, this is ridiculous. Like, they're huge, and they just scoop, like hundreds of thousands of pounds of dirt in one go. And so, like, this is the tool that I'm going back in time in my mind, in my youth, with looking at like, wow, I was using like a kitchen spoon back then, thinking this is the biggest hole I've ever dug. And I've been seeing history that I'm surprised by. I'm trying to absorb all of that at the same time. It's a lot. But back then, that hole created, you could call it a trip hazard, I guess, but this was what was sent out into the universe back then. And it's just been wiggling around ever since. And so it's a trip hazard, quote unquote, that others stumble across as they move on through their path like this. So if you can imagine two of these things just wiggling their way and bumping into each other and then going a different way, people can find ideas, they can find each other, they can find inspiration, they can find displeasure, they can find, you name it, right? Like anything. It's all math. These are the consequences of the additions and subtractions and multiplications and divisions and this all the time. And you'll notice it moves not just around left and right, up and down, but it goes close to the camera and it comes back as well. Right? This is three-dimensional. But space-time is more than that, right? It's another dimension and another dimension and another dimension. So, having said that, also in my book, there's a section I want to read. It's about a character named Brian. And Brian had a very interesting experience. I gotta find this section here. I was not prepared to read this just now, but Mr. Brian had gone off on this meditation. Right? In his meditation, he experienced other dimensions, right? I gotta figure out here. I am totally not prepared for this section. I am so sorry. But let me see if I can get here. Okay, I think this is the section. Yeah. This is a little bit longer of a read than what I've done before, but Brian's off to this park, and it was modeled after a real life park near the house here, but probably still 20 miles that way, right? But after tuning out the world and finding the rhythm of his breathing, Brian immersed himself in the sights, sounds, smells, temperature, gravity, and thickness of the atmosphere he found himself meditating in. It was the park below that reminded him that he was projecting. The feeling of being submerged under water but able to breathe set his mind in motion. The trap he was facing and the feelings of missing a part of himself were based around this submerged self. He observed his body sitting upright below the tree. It was not time to go back, and he was alone. The opportunity to discover the bonds holding him back was upon him. He drifted for a short while, finding his way to the club where he would soon begin working. The time had changed as well. It was dark, for his astral body could only interpret the limits of the reality within which his physical body would be. The normal crowd of partiers waited outside, and Brian saw himself playing dubstep and other drum and bass music. Suddenly the night ended, and his projection moved to find him resting at home. Out of his window, overlooking the small cityscape, his astral body dimmed. Something lurked nearby. The force of the enemy caused Brian to lose focus for a moment, and when he regained control over the moment, the threat was gone. He tried to relive that moment and each time stared out the window, seeing only the night, but no threat. Moving forward in time again, Brian found himself sitting in a police station being threatened and questioned about Sarah. His responses were truthful and satisfied his own morality, but the interrogator was not pleased. Watching as his physical body left the police facility, the aura around his projection dimmed once more, significantly so. Instead of recalibrating and risking the loss of the looming threat, he waited. Far in the distance, away from the station, was pure darkness. A ring of light around his position in front of the police headquarters had become obvious, blocking out all of the surrounding buildings and structures. People were always transparent in his projections, but the people completely disappeared then. Remaining calm and focused on the situation, Brian observed that the darkness in all directions seeking information. In a time and space too far for him to reach, a red orb hovered ominously. The depths of the projection felt deeper and deeper, increasing the pressure on his body. No smells, no sounds, no sights, except for the orb could be sensed. So, feeling limbo, he ceased his pursuit. And that's one little short read through there. I have a bit more in another section. I wonder if I can find that quickly. So, I'll come back to that. Yeah, I'm going to have to come back to it. So, while I was reading, I was not able to witness this thing running around, so I'm going to have to rewatch the tapes back, as they say. I'm reminded, and I don't know why this is relevant, but of an anchor, like an anvil. Not a boat anchor, but like something heavy like an anvil. Just out in the field. And there's a string, and the string goes up, and instead of a balloon, it's like a kite or something. It's like a big kite, and it's just flapping away. And the way that change happens, the way that chaos like this happens is, the kite is gonna flutter like this in the wind, and go up and down and do this and all of this thing. The anvil doesn't go anywhere. right? It just stays there. And then, of course, the string just tethers and connects the two of them, but the string is subject to tensile strength, and it can stretch and twist and become taut or loose or whatever, right? And when it's loose, the kite might be falling. If it's taut, the kite is pulling, and so on. It could go the other way. Quite strange to think about, but if the kite is stable, the anvil could drop and then pull the kite with it, just as the kite might try to pull on the anvil. I feel like I'm the anvil, and the ideas like this are the strings, and there's a kite on the other side of it. I can't see the kite though. I'm just an anvil in a field. But gravity, mass, rain can erode an anvil. The ground can separate and the anvil falls through, pulls the kite with it, for example. If it falls hard and fast enough, the kite breaks loose and flies away. If the anvil's ropes are not strong enough, the kite can snap the ropes and go flying off as well. So I don't know why that's relevant, but it's something that occurs to me. Yeah. I'll leave that there. Video 2. I have a little bit of editing to do because of the crop outs. I apologize for that. I always try to do these in one through take, but flowing ideas and things, I don't want to cut out any of the authenticity of the spoken words, because to me that's not deceptive. It's just why? I mean, if we were having coffee or something, like this would be the same conversation. We would get distracted and then get right back on topic. So the only difference is we don't get to see what the distraction is. It's just cut out from the middle. I'm gonna mute my microphone and we're gonna watch this until it stops because it's really cool and I want to hear the sounds. So